In June of 1980, a big Army plane landed on a dirt strip in a lonely part of Canada. The place was called Nahani. The doors of the plane opened, and out walked 28 huge, shaggy animals called wood bison. These were the biggest land animals in the whole western half of the world. They stepped into a quiet valley that had not seen a wild bison like them in over 100 years. What happened next would leave scientists amazed for decades to come, because these animals did something nobody expected, something so strange that even today, experts cannot fully explain it. The people who brought the bison to Nahani just hoped the animals would survive. 28 animals is a very small number to start a whole new group from. One hard winter, one pack of hungry wolves, or one sickness could wipe them all out before they had a chance. But that is not what happened. Staying alive turned out to be easy for them. Having babies turned out to be easy too. The real surprise came later, and it was something nobody on the team had planned for or even imagined. The bison did not just live in that valley, they left it. They swam across a wide river that scientists had always said was too big and too dangerous for them to cross. They started brand new herds in places that no human had ever picked for them. And little by little, they began fixing old broken meadows that had been falling apart since before World War I, all without any help from people. This is the story of one of the most amazing animal comebacks in North American history. It is the story of how Canada wiped these giant animals out on purpose a long time ago, how it spent 45 years trying to bring them back, and what scientists are learning now about what happens when the biggest animal in a place finally comes home. But before we get to what the bison are doing today, we need to understand what was lost when they disappeared. And first, we need to understand what kind of animal this really is, because it is not the bison you might be picturing in your head. When most people hear the word bison, they think of the shaggy buffalo from old cowboy movies and old coins. That is a different animal called the plains bison. The wood bison is its much bigger cousin from the north, and it is truly enormous. A full-grown male can weigh over 2,000 pounds and stand almost 6 feet tall at the shoulder. That makes it the heaviest land animal anywhere in North or South America. It is built for cold weather. It can push through snow piles taller than its own legs using its giant head and the thick hump of muscle on its back to sweep snow away and reach the plants hiding underneath. Most other big plant-eating animals would starve in weather like that, but not the wood bison. Size is impressive, but it is not the most important thing about this animal. The most important thing is that the wood bison is not just an animal that eats grass. It is an animal that builds and shapes the land around it. It eats the tall grass down low. It stomps down old dead plants, pushing them back into the dirt where they turn into soil. It rolls around in the ground, digging shallow pits called wallows. Rain fills these pits with water, and they become tiny ponds where frogs and other small creatures can lay their eggs, even in places that are usually too dry for them. The bison also leaves droppings full of nutrients all across the land, feeding the soil in a way that keeps the whole area healthy. Mother bison even teach their babies where the best wallows are and where the best grass grows, passing this knowledge down for generations, walked over the same paths again and again. Put all of that together, and the wood bison becomes much more than just a big furry animal wandering through the forest. It becomes something like a builder or an engineer. It opens up thick, crowded forest land and turns it into open meadows where all kinds of other plants and small animals can live. So when this animal disappears from an area, it is not just losing one type of creature. It is like turning off a machine that keeps the whole ecosystem running. And that is exactly what happened in Canada. And it happened on purpose. Starting in the middle of the 1800s, people wanted the thick, warm hides of wood bison to sell. Hunting crews were hired. They tracked down herds using fast, powerful rifles, and they were terrifyingly good at their job. A single team of hunters could wipe out an entire valley full of bison in just one hunting season. By the early 1900s, out of what used to be a huge population spread across the north, only around 250 wood bison were left alive in the entire world. Canada did try to fix its mistake. In 1922, it created a place called Wood Buffalo National Park to protect the last of these animals, but then the country made things even worse. Over the next several years, thousands of plains, bison, the other type, were shipped into that very same park. The two types of bison mixed together and had babies with each other. Along with the mixing came disease, spreading quickly through the herds. By the 1940s, scientists looked at what was left and came to a sad conclusion. The pure wood bison, the real deal, was completely gone. Extinct forever, they believed. But here is where luck stepped in a way nobody could have predicted. In 1957, a scientist working for the Canadian government was flying over a very remote and hard-to-reach part of that same park, just doing a normal survey from the air. Suddenly, he spotted something that was not supposed to exist anymore. Down along a river, cut off from everything else by more than 100 kilometers of rough, wild land, was a herd of about 200 bison. Something about them looked different, and in a good way. Their humps were taller and more square-shaped than the mixed-up hybrid bison everyone had gotten used to seeing. Scientists tested the animals, and the impossible turned out to be true. These were real, pure wood bison, completely free of disease. They were the closest thing left on planet Earth to the original animal that people thought had disappeared forever. The subspecies that had been declared extinct had actually survived, quietly, all alone, hidden away from the world. Now Canada finally had a group of pure bison it could use to try to bring the whole subspecies back, as long as it could keep this special herd safe and healthy. From that point on, everything Canada did was slow, careful, and planned with great patience. Scientists caught a small number of these pure bison and moved them into a few different protected areas to keep them safe. One of these places was called Elk Island National Park in Alberta. It was fenced in and kept free of disease, acting like a safe storage place or an ark for the entire future of the subspecies. Years passed, and the herd at Elk Island slowly grew bigger and stronger. Eventually, it grew large enough that some of the animals could be spared and sent somewhere else to start a brand new wild population. 28 of them were chosen. They were loaded onto that big military plane and flown north into the Nahanni Valley. The choice of Nahanni was not random at all. This valley had wide, open meadows, spots with minerals the bison needed, and flat land along a river called the Liard, all of which gave the bison exactly what they would need to eat, roll around in mud wallows, and survive the brutal northern winter. So in June of 1980, those 28 animals stepped out of their travel crates and into the valley. Then everyone just had to wait, because with such a tiny group of founding animals, one bad season could wipe the entire project out before it even had a chance to grow. Stepping out of the crates was never really the hard part, though. The real question was whether these bison could actually build something lasting. The answer came faster than anyone had guessed. Within just a few months, by the following year, scientists watching the herd saw them already hard at work, doing the exact behaviors that make wood bison so special. They were eating the meadow grass down to the dirt. They were digging wallows that filled up with rain. They were stomping down thick bushes along the riverbank. This was the very first time in about 100 years that this kind of bison behavior had happened anywhere in Canada. It switched back on almost the very moment the bison arrived, as if the ability had simply been waiting patiently inside the animals the whole time, ready for the land to need it again. A few years later, wildlife managers brought in a few more bison from Elk Island. This was not to save the herd from dying out, since it was already doing fine, but to make sure the group had a wider mix of genes to stay healthy in the long run. Nearby, a local community, also called Nahanni Butte, watched all of this happen from their own land. The bison were easy to spot, right from the highway that ran through the area. But none of this success was completely safe or guaranteed. The same diseases that had wiped out the original wood bison were still spreading through the mixed-up hybrid herds living in other parts of Canada, kept away from this clean, healthy population only by distance. Over the following decades, outbreaks of a disease called anthrax killed bison up north in waves. Hungry wolves picked off young bison calves during hard, deep snow winters. Cars and trucks hit and killed bison crossing the highway. Bad weather sometimes ruined the bison's chances of having healthy babies in certain years. These dangers were real, and they never fully went away. But the real story, the one that grabbed everyone's attention, was not about the dangers. It was about how far the bison kept spreading. By the late 1990s, that original small group had grown into a much bigger herd, and it was moving far beyond any boundary that scientists had originally drawn on their maps. The scientists were honest about what this meant. One single release spot in Nahani could not be enough to bring back an entire subspecies all on its own. So Canada changed its plan. Instead of putting all of its effort into just the Nahanni Valley, both the federal government and local territories started new founding herds in several other regions, including parts of the Yukon, the lower Mackenzie Valley, and areas near the border of British Columbia. This way, no single disaster in one place could wipe out the whole subspecies at once. Inside the Nahani area itself, more bison were added over time, bringing the total number of founding animals up to 99. Every single prediction scientists had made had to be updated and made bigger. By the year 2000, the Nahani herd had grown past 200 animals. By 2017, when scientists did their most careful count from the air, they found roughly 960 bison spread out across an area of about 10,000 square kilometers. That is a bigger area than the famous Yellowstone National Park in the United States. By every way scientists measure success, how many animals there are, how much land they cover, and how steadily the population keeps growing, this had become one of the most successful efforts to bring back a large wild animal anywhere in northern Canada. Because of this success, Canada's wildlife experts officially changed the wood bison status from endangered to threatened. This was the very first time the subspecies had improved on paper since scientists first started keeping track of it. And then, quietly, the airplane flights simply stopped. No more crates were unloaded onto dirt airstrips. No more trucks carried new founding bison into the boreal forest. From that point forward, the wood bison living in the Nahanni Valley were completely on their own, running their own lives, making their own choices, without any more help from people. And this is exactly where the story stops being something anyone could have predicted. Let's start with the map itself, because this is the part that truly surprised the scientists the most. The original program had only released bison in the lower part of the Liard Valley. But their children and grandchildren started living and building wallows in places that had never been chosen as release sites at all. The Liard River is wide, cold, and powerful, and scientists had always confidently said it was a natural wall that bison simply could not cross. It turned out to be no wall at all. The bison swam across it, from one bank all the way to the other, completely on their own, in crossings that left the people watching feeling both amazed and a little uneasy. On the other side of that river, the bison set up a permanent new home in the northeastern part of British Columbia, in land that no human being had ever picked out for them. The bison chose their own path for expanding, and they chose it very well. Wood bison that all came from that one single group in Nahani now claim territory across 3 different parts of Canada. This is the clear sign of a population that is truly standing on its own 2 feet, so to speak, without needing anyone's help anymore. But the map was only the first surprise. What the bison were doing to the land itself belongs in a whole different category of amazing. For over 100 years, this ecosystem had been slowly falling apart without a big animal like the bison to keep it open and healthy. Without something to eat down the grass and stomp through the bushes, the open meadows had slowly closed up and turned into thick forest. The old mud wallows had filled in with dirt and stopped catching rainwater. The whole cycle of nutrients moving through the soil had slowed way down without bison droppings spreading them around. Over that entire century, these slow, quiet changes had become the new normal. Everyone alive today simply assumed that the valley had always looked this way, thick and closed in. Now, all of that is running in reverse. All along the Liard River, the meadows are being pushed back open again by the very same animal that did this exact job for thousands and thousands of years before people wiped it out. Old wallows are filling up with water once more. Frogs, insects, and other small creatures that depend on those tiny ponds are coming back to land that had not seen them in living memory. And here is the truly important part to understand. What the bison are doing is not just some nice nostalgic return to how things used to look a long time ago. It is the return of an entire natural process, a job that this land had been missing for over 100 years, quietly switching back on, piece by piece. We actually have hard scientific proof of just how powerful this process can be, though it comes from a slightly different place. A long-term study published in a well-known science journal called PNAS in the year 2022 followed a prairie in Kansas for almost 30 years. The scientists found that bringing bison back to that land roughly doubled the number of native plant species growing there. This effect was much bigger than what happened with cattle grazing the same land, or with no grazing animals at all. It was one of the largest increases in plant diversity that scientists have ever recorded from bringing back a grazing animal. That particular study was done on plains bison living on grassland, not wood bison living in the northern forest, so it is not exactly the same situation. But it tells us something very important and very hopeful. When you put this kind of animal back into a place it was born and shaped to live in, the amount of life and diversity that can come back is truly amazing. The full scale of what is happening in the northern forests of Nahani has not been completely measured by scientists just yet. But the 45 years of information gathered there now stands as one of the longest continuous records anywhere of a large plant-eating animal being brought back to a northern ecosystem. And the direction things are heading in is very clear. There is also a third part to this story, and it has nothing to do with plants or animals at all. It is about a single word. In the language spoken by the local community at Nahanni Butte, there has always been a word for the wood bison. For more than 100 years, the people who spoke that language kept using this word, even though there was no animal left anywhere for it to point to. The rivers and meadows of the valley still carried the name of a creature that not a single living person there had ever actually seen with their own eyes. The word survived long after the real animal had disappeared. And now, finally, the animal has come back to meet its own name once again. The thing the word describes actually exists in the world again. To me, that is really the heart of this whole story. The wallows being dug into the soil right now by today's bison, some of them even deepening the very same dips left behind by herds that vanished over a century ago, will keep collecting rainwater long after today's bulls have grown old and died. These little pools will keep supporting breeding cycles for creatures that no other northern animal can properly support in that way. Based on what has happened in other bison populations around the world, some of these wallows might last for decades and decades into the future. Now step back for a moment and look at the whole shape of this incredible story. 45 years of effort, 28 founding animals at the very start, a subspecies that scientists officially declared extinct back in 1940, a pure, healthy population discovered completely by luck in 1957. Bison airlifted out of a genetic safe haven in 1980. And now a population that is writing its own future all across the northern forest, completely on its own, without anyone ever needing to open another travel crate again. And that, to me, is the lesson worth remembering from stories like this one. We tend to think that fixing a broken landscape is something we do ourselves, something we carefully plan, manage, and control from start to finish. But the story of Nahani suggests something much humbler and much stranger than that. We only got one single thing right. We simply put the animal back where it belonged. After that, the bison completely stopped following any map that humans had drawn for them. They crossed the rivers that scientists confidently said they never would. They settled on ground that no person had ever chosen for them. And they restarted a whole natural process that no team of scientists could have ever planned or built themselves, no matter how hard they tried. In the end, we did not restore that valley ourselves. We simply returned the one animal that already knew exactly how to do it, and then we quietly got out of its way.